Hi, I'm Benton Stokes.
And I'm Elaine O'Rourke.
And this is Cocktail Theology.
Seriously, I'm going to start just wearing a camera and a microphone all the time when we're together.
All the time?
All the time. Because you are funny and deep, and no one gets to hear all of it. I get to hear at least some of it. So from now on, the spy cam is going to be right here. The Benton cam is going to be right here on my lapel. I'm not wearing a lapel. It's probably better than wearing like a beanie with a with a camera in the front of the beanie.
Right.
Do you think you could talk to me if I were doing that?
Probably not. At least not look at you. I'd be like over there.
Look at me, damn it!
No! I'm running. I'm over there.
And I would just
catch me.
I'm like, yeah. So I think I'm going to start wearing the spy cam because I think our listeners deserve to hear Benton uncensored.
Uncensored.
Uncensored Benton.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. It's a Sunday evening, and we are at my place, and we're having margaritas. We're also having yummy cheese, and we're having peach jam that you made, which pairs so good with the goat cheese that we're having with crackers. I know you're so jealous. I know you want to be here, and you should be jealous because this is awesome.
And if you bring us to you, we will do this with this in your house.
Sure will.
That would be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
If you want Cocktail Theology to come to you, please let us know.
Yeah, we'll mix drinks. We'll bring cheese. It'll be like we do all the time.
That's right. With the Benton cam.
With the Benton cam, right.
No, but I mean, we love to do that kind of thing. So you could gather some of your friends. We'd sell tickets or do something. I don't know. We'd figure it out. We'd love to do it somewhere else and just have the fun of that.
We would love to do it somewhere else.
If you live in Bali.
Oh, yes.
Or in parts of the Gulf, Phoenix, actually Flagstaff. Well, Flagstaff snows. Anyway, if you live in warm climes and you want us there over the winter to warm up your winter, please let us know because we will come to you.
We sure will.
You can have a Christmas party with us.
I love it.
Well, you could treat your friends. You could say, we're not buying you ties and socks this year, friends.
Right.
Instead, we are bringing to you cocktails, cheese, and two people who will just be there and do whatever it is they do.
But talk and
then talk
do the
and
things
stuff.
we do.
But he would play music.
Oh, I would. I totally would.
He would play music. I can mix drinks.
But that would be so much fun.
So please, there we are. What else is going on? You've been making music, which makes me so happy.
I have been making music. I'm so excited. I took a little solo road trip, did some writing, been in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been working here at my house with my new computer setup and doing some programming and production. I am putting out a new single in October and a new album next spring.
And today we did some videoing that we'll put up on YouTube.
We did. We did some videos of me singing some stuff at my out-of-tune piano and talking about writing and life and etc.
Yeah, so that's all awesome. And if you are listening to us before October 20th, 2018, we have a retreat coming up. And I cannot encourage you enough. I keep saying this like, it sounds so mercenary. You really need to come to our retreat. But I actually think you really need to come to our retreat.
No, you really do.
Because the material we're doing is what we used to call God ideas, and we're now talking about in terms of the really real God. It's amazing how much stuff we think we believe about God that when push comes to shove, we do not believe at all.
We really don't.
So it is about all of those ideas about God that we think we believe and how they show up in our lives and how they don't, and about what I consider to be 13 ideas about God you must have if you want to have what is actually a personal relationship with God. Not, oh Jesus, I'm so sorry, don't send me to hell personal relationship, but the kind where you and God are on first name basis. So that's October 20th. You can go on to our website, schoolforseekers.com, or you can go on reallyrealgod.com and register for it. It's one day, 13 hours. It won't feel like 13 hours. It'll be fine. We'll feed you, we'll somewhat entertain you. You'll get bored, but it's green and I've got ducks. So really,
It's true.
really, so if you're
It's
listening to it before
Nashville. You can come for the weekend.
yeah, we'd help you figure that out. So do come. It's important stuff, particularly if either you've come up against a wall in your personal life and you're not sure how God works in that way, or you're starting to have that deep sense that maybe your relationship with God isn't exactly what you want it to be. This is a great place to start exploring it. It's really safe.
Yep.
reallyrealgod.com, schoolforseekers.com. If you want to bring us to you, info@schoolforseekers.com. We would love to hear from you, and we like to travel, so by all means, bring us. And Benton can mix margaritas, and I can do other things.
Yeah. Or you can make drinks and I'll sing.
Okay, I like that. So what are we talking about today, my friend?
We are talking about arch-nemeses, archetypes,
And your passion for comics.
and my passion for comics and superheroes. Yeah. I started collecting comic books when I was a kid. I have comic books that I bought brand new in 1975. I've got comic books from the 60s, and I love DC comic books. Probably many of our listeners are familiar with the Marvel comics because of all the movies that have come out in recent years that are based on the Marvel characters. DC has kind of focused on comics and graphic novels and television. There are a number of television series that are based on DC characters.
What about the whole Batman franchise? Because Batman's DC.
Batman is DC, and there have been movies that were successful on Batman.
Yeah. And what about Superman?
Man of Steel. There was a Superman series in the 70s and 80s that was successful with Christopher Reeve.
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman has been fabulously
Lately.
successful. Man of Steel, Justice League, those are DC movies.
So
They've not been as successful as the Marvel movies.
It's because there's a dark side to DC. My first husband, good man, was into comics. That's when I started to know something about comics. But I was much more into alternative stuff, like Hothead Paisan and, lesbian-focused stuff, so the independent stuff, all of that. But what I remember most about any comic books ever is Arkham Asylum. Batman we started to see the dark side.
When
Dark
that
Knight,
whole thing went...
that whole Dark Knight,
It
right?
started going dark in the 80s,
Right.
90s, yeah.
Fascinating. So that's when DC, to me, started to become like the comics books one should be interested in because you started getting layers. People started being complex.
I think DC does have a great deal of complexity to their characters that I really love.
I'm so uninterested in just basic good guys and bad. Yeah.
Right. So now what you see in comic books, a lot of it is a lot of gray. So you have people that are good guys, but their methods aren't necessarily, or you have bad guys who want to see the right thing happen, but they don't really know how to do that. Yeah, it's really interesting what's been going on in comics for the last few years. You just saw the Teen Titans, the new Teen Titans movie, which I have to tell you that Teen Titans are my favorite. Now, not the animated version that you saw, which I think are super cute and funny and hilarious, but I loved the Teen Titans lineup from the 70s and the 80s with Robin and Wonder Girl and Speedy and Aqualad, and that lineup was my favorite. And then in the 80s, there was a reboot which included Starfire and Raven, which showed up in the animated version that you saw. Cyborg, Beast Boy came back around, which was a character from the 70s. And I love the Teen Titans. You saw the movie.
I did.
The conversation that came from that was basically about every superhero needs an arch-nemesis.
And in the movie, it becomes this thing where Robin is convinced that the way to get a movie made about him is to have an arch-nemesis.
Which I
There's
love.
something about the arch-nemesis idea that you can't be a superhero without one. I suppose one could have an arch-nemesis and not be a superhero. But if you're going to be a superhero, at least now that superheroes are grayer and more interesting, there has to be an arch-nemesis. Can I confess something to people? Yeah, I think you already know this. So in almost any movie or almost any series, and if I say Harry Potter, you'll know immediately where I'm going with this. My favorite character is pretty much always the arch-nemesis. So Voldemort actually is kind of an uninteresting character.
He's pretty uninteresting.
He's boring. But Snape?
Snape is layered.
Love Snape. I love the layers of people. I love the shadow side. I'm interested in how people work. I totally believe that we can be integrated human beings. All of that. So Snape to me is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Harry's sort of interesting. He's more interesting when he's really screwed up,
right.
in my view. So when I hear that these guys have to have arch-nemeses, I am much more interested often in the arch-nemesis. And it's because, for me, the superhero and the arch-nemesis are the shadow sides of one another.
Yeah.
Right? Going back to Arkham Asylum for a minute. So Arkham Asylum is early on in the Dark Knight thing, which is the graying of Batman.
Right.
The darkening of Batman. And Arkham Asylum is where we get the backstory on the Joker, where we
Yes.
start really understanding why the Joker's who he is.
Right.
There's a point in Arkham Asylum where you start realizing that really Batman and the Joker, just a slight bit of difference between them. There's a choice in there. There's something that happens. And the thing that becomes interesting about Batman is you can see him really leaning over much closer to the bad guy than we want him to be. That's when I started to find all that stuff interesting. Here we are, but for choices.
Yeah.
So we all have dark and light.
Right.
However you want to frame that. We all have our better side, worse side, flesh and spirit, however you want to frame that. There are lots of ways to do it biblically, lots of ways to do it for Jung, lots of ways to do it in other ways, but we all have that. And the question is, what happens when we start making choices? We make choices every single day. Every single day. And very often, the difference between our taking the trajectory towards being the Joker, if you will, and the trajectory towards being the better side of Batman is about the accumulation of our choices.
Yeah.
Right? I find that interesting.
It is interesting. And comic books have introduced characters or have developed characters in a direction that is way more gray. So you have like Suicide Squad, for instance, where it's Harley Quinn. Okay, so Harley Quinn was the psychiatrist who was treating Joker.
Ah.
And in the process of treating Joker, she goes mad.
Okay.
And so in the original take on the comic book,
Right.
she pretty much just becomes a baddie.
Right.
But in the newer twist on her, she's conflicted.
Okay.
Okay. So there's this part of her, she looks kind of like the Joker. She does the painted face.
She's
and
a
she does
Harlequin.
she's a Harlequin. She is. But they've actually played up the conflict in her to where there's a part of her where her methods may always be crazy and wrong, but her end game is not necessarily. And you have other characters in the DC universe, Marvel too, but more so
It's clearer in DC.
In DC, it's clearer. You have these characters in the Suicide Squad where basically they are people that have been convicted of their crimes, and in some cases the crimes have been a little heinous. And
all right, wait a minute.
we'll just be honest.
Wait. I'm trying to understand a little heinous.
They've been a little heinous.
Okay.
Because we're operating in the grays here.
As opposed to a lot heinous.
Yeah,
Because
right.
heinous is one of those shaded
Heinous
words.
plus, right? Not heinous plus. These are heinous minus.
Hyper heinous.
Hyper heinous, right? Not hyper heinous, but heinous light. They're heinous light. But see, they can be convinced to do the right thing.
Okay.
Anyway, there's depth and dimension to these characters. Is what I'm trying to get at. So, like Catwoman, okay. So Catwoman
Love
is a great example, and she's classic.
Well, and even in the Batman TV show,
Yes,
she had those layers. I mean, she
Yes.
was a much more interesting character than anyone
she has
else.
always been in the DC universe one of the most interesting characters because there is this conflict. There's like this survival thing that's going on in her, where she has to do what she has to do, and sometimes that means she breaks the law or she hurts somebody. But in the midst of all that, she and Bruce fall in love. There's a romance between Batman and Catwoman that happens. And then even in the modern DC universe, there was a version of the Justice League where she was a part of it, which is so interesting because Catwoman's a loner and a survivor.
Well, she's a cat.
And so, and so to have her like be an ally of Green Arrow and Booster Gold and people like that is so...
Jumped into the really nerd section now.
Yeah, I know I have.
Okay, just letting you
But what I'm getting at is just these characters are multidimensional.
Yes.
There's depth to that.
Yes.
And to me, that mirrors real life a lot better
Right.
than the very black and white. Because most of us don't operate in the black and white most of the time.
So that actually brings me to the part that I find interesting about the whole darn thing.
Okay.
Okay, go with me, people. Okay, I'm going to head into the Bible. You ready? Here we go. So one of the distinctions between law and fulfillment of law, so one of the things I've talked about before, and if you guys have missed this, we should talk about it again at some point, is that when we say Jesus is the fulfillment of the law, it's more like he is filling the mold that the law created,
Right.
rather than he makes the law irrelevant, okay?
Right.
And if you don't know what that means, that's fine, skip that. You don't need to know it for the rest of this podcast. Don't give up. There's a difference between that on, off, black, white, right, wrong, that law suggests to us, whether you're talking about exceeding the speed limit or you're talking about wearing mixed fabrics in Leviticus, right?
Yeah.
There's that, but then if you don't think of the world in terms of boxes, if you're not a J on Myers-Briggs, then everything else becomes layered.
Yeah.
It's not even so much that things become gray, they become layered. It's like if you had translucent pieces of plastic and they went from dark to light and you started adding them somehow. But the layers of colored plastic, you start getting different shadings,
Sure.
right? It's more like that. Human beings are more like that. And since, I don't know, probably, well, I could pin Nixon's resignation, but that's okay. We've been acknowledging more and more layered. And I think one of the places that our culture is really having trouble is between people who want things to be black and white and people who want things or understand things to be layered.
Yeah.
Right? Going back to the arch-nemesis thing, the thing that I find interesting about the arch-nemesis is, of course, it's the shadow side of the hero.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I read the arch-nemesis in the Bible.
Really?
I do.
Say more about that.
I will. So here's the deal. I don't think it's in the Bible, but I think people read it this way. So I think we love the arch-nemesis. We love Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. We love the constant ongoing battle between two sides that are equally matched, and one is evil and one is good, although if you look at arch-nemeses in literature or in comics, it's not quite that clear,
Yeah.
good, bad.
Yeah.
But we love that idea, this ongoing thing, which frankly was a heresy in the 3rd century, but that's okay, we're going to keep going with that. This ongoing battle between two matched creatures or two matched gods or whatever. I find that to be the situation that a lot of Christians of particular branches of Christianity see in the whole God-Satan thing. Satan is God's arch-nemesis.
Yep. Yep. I totally see that.
Now, in classic arch-nemesis stuff, and this happens in the Teen Titans movie, what becomes clear is that if it's truly an arch-nemesis, this will go on. There is no conquering if it's truly an arch-nemesis in that archetypal way. I have heard many Christians, I'm using that word very deliberately, talk about God and Satan as if they were arch-nemeses rather than something else.
Yeah, because many of those same people will say Satan's already been defeated, but Satan still has power.
Mm-hmm.
In their reading of reality, Satan still has power, like equal to God.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that either you have to say that God is deliberately kind of keeping hands off. If you want an omnipotent, omniscient God, then either God is choosing to be hands-offish and allowing Satan, this particular arch-nemesis version of Satan, to do Satan's dirty work, or they're equally matched, which then kind of messes with that whole God omnipotent thing, or time has that both eternity and linearity aspect, and we're not exactly sure where we are and all that. And in my mind, and I could be wrong, I have not talked to every single Christian who espouses this view, although, please, I would love to talk with you, honestly, because I'm interested in how this works.
Right.
If you really hold that Satan and God are arch-nemeses, then that battle's never over.
Right.
If that's actually what's going on.
Yeah.
If it's not what's going on, if what has happened is God has effectively won, but is allowing all of this to happen, that's a very different view of God than most of the people who want to say that there's an eternal battle going on want God to be.
The whole idea that Lucifer was allowed to become Satan in the first place. If Lucifer was an angel, then God had to allow Lucifer to take some angels with him and build a whole underworld, which doesn't square with God's character and doesn't square with what we understand angels to actually be.
And even if you buy, I mean, we're roaming all over here for a minute, but even if you buy the idea that angels have more independence than we normally ascribe to angels, even if you think there was only one angel who had independent thought, independent character, could choose differently, which would be like that first gray DC character, if you will. Mm-hmm. Even if you buy that, if you're going to say that God chose to allow the fall of this one particular independent, much more human-like angel into being the arch-nemesis battling it out for the souls of human beings, that makes God a lot more like the Dark Knight than like Superman.
A lot of people, a lot of Christians, pin the introduction of evil in the world on Lucifer. They think that if Lucifer hadn't defied God, taken angels with him, done this whole thing, become a snake, tempted Eve, then evil wouldn't have been introduced into the world, that it's all Lucifer's fault.
And isn't that interesting? We need someone to blame. We have to blame the Joker. We have to blame the guy who killed Bruce Wayne, that's Batman's parents, in the alley.
Yeah.
We have to blame all of this on that one tragic, horrible thing that happened. If it hadn't happened, never would have there been a problem. And so that's what we do as human beings. Now, we were talking earlier before we started recording this for y'all, you poor innocent people. We were talking about that it's not clear to me, given all of this, that whether we take the arch-nemesis idea from our interpretation of the Bible, whether our interpretation of the Bible has come out of this it doesn't matter. But there is that moment, right? We like to look back and say, here's the moment where I fell.
Yep.
If only he hadn't walked into my life, I would still be blah, blah. If I hadn't been yelled at by my 5th grade teacher, everything, whatever the thing is, we want to find the person or the entity that caused it, blame it, and say, and from there on, it's sort of out of our hands.
Yep.
If Lucifer's betrayal of God and taking of angels, it's like a church split. It's a church split. It's when somebody on staff says, I'm leaving, I'm going to start a new church, and takes half the church with them.
Yes.
It's that story.
Yeah.
And that's how pastors feel. Right? It's like God going, darn it, had I only seen this coming.
Yeah.
But it's that, right?
Yeah.
It's that. Here's what's going on in my head. And I'm not sure everyone needs to hear what's inside my head. But, we're close, so you get to do this. I wonder whether part of our understanding of Jesus isn't dealing with that problem. We don't want God to be gray. We want no gray from God. So we read Jesus back into the Old Testament so that it really becomes more like Jesus is letting the angels go. Because Jesus is going to come back and make it all work again. And God kind of gets to stand back and go, well, I'm still omnipotent, I'm still whatever. I'm not finding any of this theologically satisfying. And it's not the character I know of God, from my experience of God.
Right, me neither.
But it's the way we talk about it. Okay, so in the whole Lucifer story, and I could go on about the King James thing for a while, but in the Lucifer story, and I didn't grow up with this story, right? I had to learn the story, and so I probably have it wrong emotionally, if not intellectually. In the story, Lucifer is the angel who wants to be God or as powerful as God, can't do that in God's realm, goes off and populates another realm, taking renegade or rebel angels with him.
Yeah.
In that story, what's God's response? Before we move ahead, a few 100,000 years, whatever, what's God's response to that moment? In the way the story is told. I don't want to go to the Bible because it's not about the Bible, right? This is about stories. This is the way we're taught it.
All I really remember, all I really know from my fundamentalist upbringing is that God lets him go.
So it's a little bit like the prodigal son,
Yeah.
taking the inheritance, leaving.
Uh-huh.
So God lets the rebel angels and everybody go, but God's aware of it.
God's aware of it.
Does God feel betrayed?
Probably.
And then that angel, that dark angel, becomes the one battling it out in Gotham City or whichever city. God's on one side,
Yep.
the angels on the other. They're using the city as the battleground. That would be us.
Uh-huh.
And the whole time, we as human beings are required to choose which side we're going to be on while they're messing around with it. And I'm finding this theologically unsatisfying.
It fits into modern myth archetype kind of stuff. Arch-Nemesis versus the hero. It's very Greek. It's very mythic. It's very Dante, but it's not scriptural.
Well, and people would say, no, but wait, in Isaiah, there's the angel that falls. Well, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I could go back to why King James does that, but that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think we want heroes, and we want anti-heroes, and we want villains. And, we want human beings to be perfectly pristine and clean and uncomplicated. You want to sleep with the bad boy, but you should marry the good boy. It's that version. It's the same thing, right?
Same thing.
We're deeply attracted to complicated and to interesting and to layers, but we're terrified of that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we want to know who's good and who's bad and who we are supposed to align ourselves with.
We understand the relationship between good and evil, between God and Lucifer, between the Dark Knight and Joker. We want to understand it as God being shining hero, Lucifer being stellar bad guy, and that there's really no competition. But the minute we set up a competition, if there's actually any kind of competition, that whole black and white thing's over. It's done.
Right. I think it's a lot easier for Christians to ascribe black and white when they have personalities to attach, because what happens is you choose between God and Satan. But the thing is, most of us don't actively choose. You either actively choose God or you passively choose Satan. Most people don't actively choose Satan.
Dallas Willard used to say, and it wasn't original with him, but I heard him say it many times, so, that no one actively chooses the bad.
Right.
We choose what we think is the good for us.
Yeah.
Which may turn out to be the bad.
Yeah.
But you've got to be kind of like literally crazy to choose the bad.
The bad.
If you think it's the bad.
That's what I mean.
That's what you're trying to say, yeah.
You choose God or you strive for God, but you passively choose Satan if you don't actively choose God. Or even you choose God and you strive for God, but you miss the mark. So, dang.
I'd like to give a counter narrative.
Please do, because that's pretty bleak. But I mean, I grew up with that.
I know you did.
I did.
And instead, what I would like to say is this. The reason human beings are interesting at all is we're incredibly layered. And it isn't so much about whether we choose Satan or choose God. That's not the issue. The issue is what happens when we get into the habit of making choices that are dangerous to other people or harmful to other people or harmful to ourselves. We get into the habit. And it's not because we want necessarily, there are plenty of people who want evil for other people, and we all have those moments, right? You were telling me about a situation today where personally, if I could have cursed the person into the ground and watched them die in a bloody, horrible mess, I would have been perfectly happy for that to happen.
Right.
And of course, then my better side came up and said, no, that's wrong. And I was like, no, it's not. Anyway, but as human beings, we understand that or we should, if you think about it at all, what happens is we get into habits of making choices. It's like when people talk about how once you tell a lie, you're kind of stuck in this cycle of lying and it just kind of keeps, right? We get into the habit of something. We get ourselves trapped. And so it isn't so much always about choosing God or choosing Satan. That's way too simple. And it isn't even just, am I choosing for the other person or am I choosing for myself? Because it's not about everything I want is bad and everything that person wants is good. It's not about that. Instead, it's more about, are we choosing towards graciousness and gentleness and love and wholeness and decency and the fulfillment of creation, the restoration of the world? Are we choosing that? Or are we choosing not that? And it's little tiny choices.
Yeah, it is.
It's little bits. And the problem is once you start making certain kinds of choices, then you feel that you're patterned into this other set of choices. So once Batman decides that it's okay to kill the Joker, all bets are off.
Yeah. Yep.
In this idea, once God decides, well, yeah, you go, Lucifer, you take the army with you, and we'll just battle it out forever, it becomes a very different story.
I think the story that a lot of Christians point to is Job, where God and Satan are battling it out over Job.
But they're not! I'm sorry. Sorry, I shouldn't have yelled. I'm really sorry, people. Sorry.
But it's like God's like, yeah, go ahead and test Job. Job is mine. Job's a good guy. Job will do the right thing. Go ahead. And Christians take that as they relate to Job. Like, I'm being so tested. I'm being so tempted. I'm being so tried. But I will persevere. I will choose the right thing. I will choose God. God is for me. But I think that's a lot of where a lot of Christians from that cloth get their basis for their idea of what temptation is, trials are, Satan is, the role that God plays in all of that.
Tell me you've got ibuprofen. Well, I mean, it's a tricky story, right?
It is.
I mean, the story of Job is a tricky story because you're going to have to come out with complicated characters no matter what you do. Either God is so sure of Job and so confident in Job that he says, okay, you go do that, and I will show you that I can trust in Job. And then God is being kind of like, here, I'm going to hand over my Job to you. Or you get that it's this battle going on for Job's soul. Or, I mean, and instead, what's really clear from that story, Satan works for God. You know, I talk about this a lot, but the tempter, the Hasatan, that's the Hebrew for it, the Hasatan, is a tempter. That's his job. He works for God. Not he has rebelled against God and is now trying to fight with God. He works for God. He is the tempter. Which makes no sense from a New Testament point of view.
No.
Only makes sense from a Hebrew point of view if you have that sense that there's allegory and there's story and there's myth. So what that whole story is about is God being absolutely secure that we have the potential for wholeness and holiness and allowing temptation to happen to us because God knows that we are able to make good decisions. We are able to turn to God. It's a story that describes what happens for human beings when we have to deal with the temptation to the bad side. When horrible things happen, do we continue to love God? Do we continue to turn toward God? And the fact is, most of us don't. And eventually kind of we come crawling back, right? But at the moment, we're like, dang it, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
Why? It's not actually about Satan at all. But Christians don't know what to do with that.
Many Christians just read that as a very literal
Well,
good
or
versus evil kind of
scapegoating.
story. Or scapegoating, sure.
Then I can blame all the things that happened to me on this moment when I gave in to that one temptation, that one bad boy, that one job, that one lie, that one time in my life when I did something wrong.
Right.
But we do that, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
And that's the reason the arch-nemesis is so powerful. Because when it's written well, and I would go back to Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, and if you read Sherlock Holmes with his addictions and all those problems, he's walking on the edge of Moriarty all the time.
Right.
That's when it becomes interesting. And I think that the whole connection of, Job's a great example, right? That whole sense that one different choice for Job would have meant that he would be part of the legion. And this is a Christian reading, right? The legion of Satan's army. Helps us deal with that notion that maybe in fact I could have been the arch-nemesis. Maybe I could have been Moriarty. Maybe I could have been the Joker. It's that. We want to think of good and evil as black and white because it explains the gray in us. Happily, as we sit around this couch together, you and I are both on the good side of the world, and there is no gray.
Right, no gray.
I feel very grateful for that I am never tempted to do anything, including in the conversation we had earlier where I really, really could have condemned the person to hell, happily. But that's what we try and do. I find the arch-nemesis fascinating. And personally, I am so much more interested in the complicated person than I am in the good guy. It works out better for you.
It does.
And for me.
It does.
Thank God.
It does.
Because really, we couldn't be friends. Well, that's the thing, right? Is you can't actually be intimate and close with people if you have to maintain being the good guy or have to maintain being the bad guy.
Oh, right.
Because
Absolutely.
we're more complicated than that.
We're way more complicated than that.
Teen Titans go.
Teen Titans go. I love that you said that.
You'd be surprised when I know.
That makes me so happy.
So, folks, we would love to hear from you. If you grew up or you hold on to this sense that there's this ongoing battle in your life that is being played, and I'm going to phrase this wrong, and I really do want you to correct me because it's not something I understand very well. This sense that God and Satan, or good and bad, however you want to frame it, are actually in a cosmic battle being fought out through your choices or your decisions, or on a bigger scale than just you, although you are a pretty big scale yourself. Personally, I would love to hear more about how that works for you. I've read lots of theology on it, and it makes it so clinical and dry that it doesn't actually make sense to me. But I would love to hear what that means for you in your daily life. What does that look like?
Yeah.
How you think of that beyond the desire to fight against temptation. I would love to hear more about that. I'd love to get a chance to talk with you about it because it's something I understand intellectually, but it's so not the way I see the world that it's really hard for me to think about in a good way, in a healthy way, in a sympathetic and joyful, and how do I help with that way?
Right. And on a lighter note, if there's an arch-nemesis hero pairing that you really love, that you followed, maybe like me, have read comic books and have invested in these relationships between these heroes and arch-nemesis, we'd love to hear about that too.
Would be fascinating.
If you have a particular arch-nemesis hero pairing that is compelling to you or you relate to in some way, we would love to know that.
Yeah. And if we're your hero arch-nemesis pairing, we'd love to know that too.
We would.
Because that would be fascinating.
That would be
Wouldn't
extra,
it be interesting?
Yeah, that would be extra fascinating.
I know there are people who actually feel that way.
Maybe.
No, there are.
Okay.
There are people who are convinced that I have destroyed you.
Oh, okay. Great.
Going back to the earlier story.
Oh, okay, great. No, yeah.
But seriously, we would love to hear from that stuff. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what is useful to you. If we aren't being useful in what we're discussing, please let us know what you want us to talk about. And if there's something in particular that's bothering you or something in particular you want to hear talked through, feel free to tell us what you think about it. We'll start from there. We don't have to start from our own understanding. We can start from yours and talk it through.
For sure.
That would be awesome.
We would love to do that.
We would love to do that. And we would love to see you on October 20th
Yes, we would.
here in Nashville.
Definitely. Sign up, reach out, reallyrealgod.com, cocktailtheology.com, schoolforseekers.com.
Any of the .coms.
Find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc.
If you want us to come to you in the dead of winter and you live somewhere warm, we are more than happy to do that. We will make cocktails, he will make music, and we can talk or not as you like.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So,
Thanks for having me over.
Yeah, this was fun.
It was fun. Bye, guys.
Bye.